I think a lot of America is giving Elon Musk and, shall we say, his unorthodox methods a lot of grace because of what he is finding and how shocked people were, for example, at USAID. Are they going to find things you think equally shocking with the UN and the American money given to the UN and how the Pentagon spends money?
Well, I think there are a lot of shocking things in a lot of departments. There's no lack of it. What you really need, though, is a systematic approach, and in the national security space, an approach that protects vital American interests by cutting the waste. For example, as an alumnus of AID, I can tell you that there's plenty to reform, especially after the last administration. But if you really want to cut money from the budget quickly, instead of going after America's bilateral foreign aid program, go after American contributions to the UN, go after American contributions to the World Bank and the multilateral development banks, the regional banks, where America gets no credit for the money it puts in there. A carefully directed foreign assistance program is an aid to national security. That's not what we have now, but destroying it entirely is removing a weapon in the international arena that we need.
Is part of this, to be fair, take a sledgehammer, burn things to the ground so you can rebuild them better?
Well, yeah, that got the Army spokesman in Vietnam who said, well, we had to destroy that village in order to save it, a lot of publicity, none of it good. There's a way to undertake reform, and there's a way to cut off your own nose to spite your face. And the way some of this looks like to me from an outside observer's point of view is that people don't really know what they're about. For example, of all of the examples of activities that AID is financing that are really indefensible, and there are a large number, and we've seen examples portrayed by Musk's people. Have you heard anybody in this debate talk about the country aid levels? That is to say, how much we give to country X, how much we spend in country Y, what do we do in country Z? Because a well-run foreign aid program, and I'm not saying that's what exists now, but a well-run foreign aid program is trying to help our friends, trying to persuade others to become friends. How you spend it in country is open to debate. But nobody talks about, are we spending enough in the right countries to advance American interest? That's what you need. It is true. The bureaucracy resists. That is the culture of bureaucracy. We know it from public choice economics. The question is, do you have people capable of leading the bureaucracy, of kicking the bureaucracy in the butt when it needs to happen, or you just have a bunch of guys taking names off buildings and putting people on administrative leave? You can do it that way, but you're harming a long-term American interest properly understood.
You are the first person I have heard in Washington or on cable news deliver a defense of USAID that is a positive defense for what it does, not just screaming and yelling and having a tantrum about how Elon Musk is doing things. So I think that is a point very well made in terms of what USAID can do if well run. There's a point to it. We'll see if putting it under the State Department brings that. Have you been surprised, in a sense, that Donald Trump has, for lack of a better term, accomplished as much in 3 weeks as he has?
Well, we'll see how much is actually accomplished and how much is smoke and mirrors. You've got to sustain what you do, and whether that's going to come out of what Elon Musk does or not, I don't know. I do think there's a lot of feeling in the Republican Party in the country that the budget needs to be cut in Washington. I certainly believe that. I think we need to balance the budget. We need to spend more on defense, which means we have to cut even more out of domestic programs, but we've got to balance the budget. But let's face it, what they're doing now, even if you buy all of it, even if you accept everything they've done as the right course to follow, they're saving peanuts compared to what they need to go after.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.